Take mo faceda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, an EVE Online podcast recorded live while streaming. I am your host, Matterall. Today we're going to go around the board and talk about what's going on in NullSec and in player news. And we have some great guests for you, including Artemis Albosa, Kilobee, and Jurius Doctor, and we'll get to them in just a second. First, I want to introduce the panel. How are you doing today, Carneros?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Having a great time.
Great. Apothony, how are you?
I'm doing good. Just chilling, trying to get stuff done, you know.
And our friend Tiberius is back.
In the not so quiet words of Rick Sanchez, I'm back, baby! Yeah, I've been away for a while, so I've got a lot to catch up on. There's been a lot going on in my absence, so I'm going to be interested to see on what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. And Noisy Gamer's with us.
Hello, everybody.
All right, so for guests, we have, of course, somebody who's come very common to the show is Kilobee.
Hey, what's up?
He is an FC for NC Dot now, a former FC for PL, basically goes between them. And, well, he's our newest expert on Rorqual mining. We also have, from Mercenary Coalition, Artemis Albosa.
Howdy, howdy.
And you're also from a podcast, Declarations of War?
I am indeed. I've been a host on the podcast for a few months now. Co-host, that is, with Jintan and Alexiev Card.
Right. All right, good to have you here. And we also have a writer from INN, Jurius Doctor.
Hey there, everybody.
Jurius, you're from what alliance?
I'm from Iron Armada. We're an independent group in NullSec and Fountain.
I know
All right,
you guys.
Cool. Welcome, guys. Let's get this show started. So I wanted to start with INN's front pages, and one of the new articles on there is Diplomacy and the War of Words. And it's a 5-part series written here by Jurius Doctor. So, Jurius, can you tell us about that article and the series?
Yeah, so I was very interested in getting into understanding some of the, meta that's going on inside NullSec and looking at how a lot of the relationships have developed and evolved over time, kind of bridging out from my article that I wrote on the collapse of FCON and following an interview with Tarquinius. And I really wanted to see where this could go. So I expanded my look out from FCON into DRF, and I kind of wanted to know the history of what happened at MTO2 Tech 2. And from there, it kind of got away from me into a much larger story as more and more people started approaching me and more people started agreeing to speak with me. And then people started saying, hey, you know what will help you to catch up on the context? Here's a gigabyte of vlogs.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then basically people dumped a lot of material on you that allowed not just one article, but a whole series.
Well, and I think part of it is that, it's a lot for me to sort through, but I also wanted to give everybody a chance to talk to me directly in a formal way and to ask some, specific but also common questions of each of them so that I could kind of get their story, because the details of what happened at a particular fight or who whelped what cap fleet into whom is a lot less important to me than the story of what's going on, both for those people in game, in the in what's going on in the politics of the game, but where do these people come from? Like, who are the diplomats of EVE?
Were diplomats that approached you, or was it? I wonder who's talking to you to give you the information.
So I get news and information from a number of people, and part of what I do that I think allows them to be so forthcoming is that I greet everybody with the same introduction, which is, hi, I'm a writer for an INN. I'm from an independent alliance, and my blanket promise is that you will not be named or directly cited unless you expressly request it or give consent. Your responses will be kept confidential, and you'll be treated as a secure source. It's not until they agree to that that I start asking questions.
Well, that's interesting. I'm going to pull Killer B into this conversation because he has a reputation for not liking paper pushers.
Well, he actually asked me to talk to him as well, and I agreed to it, but we didn't get the chance to actually do it yet because he left to meet someone, and I don't know, I think it was working or something last weekend. So yeah, I'm going to talk to him as well. But yeah, it was kind of funny because he approached me and he was like, "Well, you're like, let me see what he said. Something with a Diplo," and I was like, "No, I'm not a Diplo." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're
dirty word.
You're sort of leadership." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I could agree with that." So, you know, that's one of the things I was going to talk to him about as well. I think that you need to be very careful who you get your information from and what they tell you, because there's obviously a lot of different stories. A lot of people will tell the same story differently, and then you have people that pretend they have they know what's going on, and when in reality they have no fucking idea what's going on at all. Like Zera, for example, or this J guy, that ominous XIX Diplo that pretended to be the most important being in the universe when in reality he's literally nobody. So yeah, if you end up talking to these people, you might end up writing an article that's just inaccurate and not good. So I'm glad that he asked me to join in as well, and I'll obviously try to give as clear information as possible.
Well, real quick, in the spirit of this discussion, what do you think a diplomat really is in EVE? What's their role?
Who?
A diplomat. Killer B, this question's for you.
Okay. I think their role is pretty important, actually. Diplomats are people that are better at talking to other people than maybe an FC is. So I'm trying to be better at diplomatics, and I've gotten a lot better at being a diplo as well. In the alliances that I've been in, like in PL, for example, you can't just be an FC. You'll always also be, at least if you are an FC on the level that I was, you'll always also be a diplo, because there's no official alliance diplomats or anything like that in PL. And it's sort of the same in NC Dot. Obviously, we have Lady Scarlet, but apart from that, I do my own diplomatics as well. And so I think I've gotten a lot better at it, but there's still people that I just have trouble talking to, that I don't have the stamina to go on to like a 4-hour conversation with them where they basically tell me their entire life's history and everything. And I think that's what diplos are really good for. Most diplomats I know are very good at listening and very patient people that I might not be, that I may not be, because yeah, like I said,
right,
I have a hard time listening for 4 hours to someone.
Well, your job is to get people in a war and through the war, not to keep them out.
Win it.
Yeah. So, Carneros, do you work with diplomats at all? You're a CEO of an alliance.
I do, and I have all the permissions to go in and participate myself if I'm interested or I don't have the right diplomat handy at a given moment. And I'll go in there sometimes, depends what it is. I mean, diplomacy can be everything from talking to enemies to talking to neutrals, or even my partners in the Imperium. Absolutely.
Oh, inter coalition diplomacy. That must be a big part of it.
Some days it is.
Yeah. Well, Tiberius and I both are in Destructive Influence Dice Corporation, which is run by Lady Scarlet, and she's been a diplomat since like 2004 or 5. Maybe.
Yeah, like really early days. Like very quickly became a diplomat.
Yeah, and for her, from what I can tell, it's a lot of management of permissions and not permissions and also standings, like who's in, who's out. She knows. Like, she won't even bring certain things to the table of leadership in NC because she already knows what to rule out and stuff like that. So I'm sure she's like a firewall to all the communications coming through. But yeah, so Jurius, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that, that's sort of one of the most interesting parts of getting to know diplomats and talking to leadership and people in different positions, because it's not just diplomats, as Killaby mentioned, that I'm soliciting. I'm wanting to talk to anybody in NullSec leadership, because they have pieces to the story of what's happening that maybe the diplomats don't even have, that they can share I like to call it the 30,000-foot perspective on what's happening in a war. And, diplomats also at some level have a take of their own. And this is actually going to be its own part of this 5-part series, is that diplomats by some extension always end up being administrators, because you'll always get that one guy who's logged in after 3 years at Aviv, who's got a capital stuck in one of your stations. And he's like, hey, can I get temporary blue so I can evac?
Yeah, right. Apothany?
I just want to ask, you say you're trying to talk to people in NullSec leadership and diplos and people kind of all places, all levels. Why in God's name did you interview me? I'm just a talking head.
I thought you were going to say the opposite.
Because you talk to people and you know who I haven't talked to.
But you've talked to everyone.
Well, I haven't talked to everybody. There have been a couple of notable figures who've declined to comment, shall we say.
Oh, can you tell us who declined to comment?
Those are my favorite.
I'll leave that for the article.
Diplomats.
Boo! No spoilers.
Things, and I therefore don't like them.
I thought Apothany was going to say, "Why haven't you talked to me?"
What about folks that you're still interested in talking to, but you haven't had a chance to yet? Do you have any of those folks on the list?
Yes, actually, I can say that there are qualitatively a few people that I've wanted to talk to. I haven't had the chance. So, Ethan Karn's one of them. ProGod, I haven't had a chance to reach out to yet, just because I've been inundated with information. Sister Bliss. Let me see who else is on my list here.
Have you at all made an effort to institute kind of a team of people to help you go through logs? For example, one of the things I did for the first time this year for the Alliance tournament summaries was I tried to assemble a team of helpers to do a bunch of interviews for me. And I've also kind of regretted not now doing that for the ATPL Hydra history articles I'm doing, because I now have so many forums and logs to read through. Are you doing it all kind of like under one man's power and it gets done in the time it takes? Or are you kind of finding people and building a team to help you go through the, miles of depth that you have to?
So I think for me, the big thing is that a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at is extremely sensitive, or is special context that should be reviewed with a particular lens around what's happened in a war or in a particular conflict or in a schism within a corporation or alliance. And it's not the kind of stuff that I want it colored coming to me from someone else's lens. I also work very strictly behind a principle of, is this something Walter Cronkite would put on the air?
It's interesting that you bring up the concept of having a team to help you work through things, because I'm self-proclaimed D-tier Diplo of MC. If you look at our Diplo list, I'm on there. But effectively, my job is to help maintain our list of who we're friendly with and who the contacts are in various organizations, and also sort of as a first contact for groups looking to hire MC. But then there's also sort of just a need for people who can remain calm and, as Killaby mentioned, just listen. And one of the things, I was reading your article, Jurius, and I want to caution people to not put Diplos into too small of a box, especially when you're dealing with small entities who don't have the manpower, or FCs with rather large egos. Like, a Diplo could be anyone with the power to do something before anyone can tell them no. And so things can get fuzzy real quick if you're not careful.
Yeah, and I think I outlaid that in the article, saying that, a Diplo by its first nature is somebody who can say yes without needing to check with someone else.
So you're a really good writer. I've read a few of your articles. What brought you to write about Eve?
Well, I jumped into Eve a few years ago after some call it extended leaves from the game due to work. In my professional career, my background's in IT consulting and project management, and so a lot of the consulting writing that I do is fairly high level, but it's stuff that never sees the light of day. It goes into a company file cabinet and never gets read again, except for its first pass. And even then, I suspect people are usually only skimming. So I love to write, and when I really started getting involved in Eve in instruction, because I started in Eve University, I decided, if I'm going to write stuff for people, I want to make it engaging. And that's what brought me to INN.
Yeah. You write those emergency manuals that people are sorting through when the nuclear bombs are going off?
Well, the kind of stuff like handover documents, like do not push this button if you don't want your entire infrastructure to fail.
Yeah, pretty valuable. All right. Well, it's cool. Does anybody know any historic diplomats that, some names that come up? We know historic FCs, right? And we know historic CEOs and personalities.
Obviously.
Who's that?
Vile Rat,
yeah.
And Diana Bollock back in the old Bob days.
Mm-hmm.
Is it not the case that if a diplomat gets to be very well known, it's either because they've done a very, very good job for a very, very long time, or they've fucked up completely and caused a war? Like it's like one of two extremes for them to become well known. Is that tend to be the case?
So are any of you here in your day lives an engineer? Like, do you wear an iron ring? I'll take that as no. So in the real world, if you are an engineer and you're wearing an iron ring, you have a requirement that you be published to a certain degree. And there are engineering magazines as part of the professional organizations that if you fuck up, if you build a bridge and it collapses and people die, your name goes in a blacklist that gets published and sent to every engineering firm on the planet.
Oh, wow.
It's literally a printed shit list, and most engineering firms will say this person led a project or designed something where people died.
You're not talking about died in the construction of. It's more like where it collapsed and.
Oh no, died in the construction of, and a big part of that, the creation of that shit list was the collapse of the Second Narrows Bridge, the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge in Vancouver, in the 1950s. It killed 150 workers.
Oh wow, didn't know that.
So it's one of those things that diplomats, like engineers, how many times do you drive over a bridge or look at a skyscraper or walk underneath an overpass and know the name of the engineer who built it, unless it's somebody very, very notable?
I see. Yeah. So your point is that their work isn't really something that comes to the surface much.
Right. And diplomats do the work of building a lot of that hidden infrastructure when it comes to alliance and when it comes to dealing with other entities.
Yeah. Well, all right. So looking forward to your series. Look for that on INN. It's a 5-part series on diplomacy. And it spans further than just Eve. It looks like different examples from real world stuff too, which is interesting. All right. So Artemis, you've been somebody I wanted to get on the show for a while. Can you give us a little bit of background on you? Although people probably know who you are anyways if they listen to podcasts.
Sure. So I started playing early in 2013. My career started much like everybody else. I just sort of jumped into HiSec, did some mission running, did some mining, got pretty lucky. I joined a fantastic small group of guys called Gateway, and they were all just as new as me, but we were all starry-eyed new bros, completely enthralled with Eve. And we eventually got war decked, and that was our first introduction to PvP. We were crap at it, and we wanted to learn. So we moved out to LowSec, started getting the hang of things, and I was hooked instantly. Eventually got tired of doing the HiSec thing, and I moved into Wormholes with low-class Alliance at the time, who were low-class wormhole mercenaries, so to speak, although we very rarely actually did contracts. Eventually got the hang of wormhole life. That's where I learned to FC, where I fell in love with fleet logistics. And after content began to dry up, I moved over to Noir, who was in Mercenary Coalition at the time, and have been having fun in NullSec ever since.
Yeah, cool. So what got you to do radio besides your radio voice?
basically Alec was in Noir when I joined, and he needed a guest for a show, so we poked our corp chat on Slack and said, "Hey, anybody want to show up to Declarations of War today?"
I call that right place, right time.
Indeed. I was a fan of the show for a long time. I quite enjoyed listening to podcasts back when I was first learning about EVE and just listening to all the stories and what people were up to and what was possible in the universe of New Eden.
So Robbie Bird says, "Hi Artemis, Init would like to say we've upgraded to 4 dreads."
Oh, really?
Coming out of the comments. Yeah. Yeah, the way I look at these shows, right, because I listened to a lot of podcasts on EVE, trying to learn more about the game when I was coming up. And the way I see these shows was there seemed to be a pairing. There was kind of like a personality guy that kind of knew things, but there was always a nuts and bolts guy. And those are the guys that were up to date on what the company was doing, like what updates were on their way. Also knew about statistics and theory, so they could tell you like why something was important. So those guys were always the more quiet guys that didn't have the forceful, showmanship that provided a lot of the actual information. Not all podcasts were like that, but there seemed to be that kind of pairing. So to me, you're like a nuts and bolts guy.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Like Noisy Gamer here, and I have a bunch of nuts and bolts guys that really just kind of deliver the facts and deliver the information. And then we have just people who look good on camera like Tiberius and Carneros.
Oh, gee.
They don't know anything, but
I love you too, man.
Can you tell we missed you? All right, let's get to player news, because there's lots of things going on out there. Although it seems quiet, there's definitely some battles going on. But one of the first things that we should talk about is probably the killing of a Marshall ship by Minilove. Does anybody fill us in on that?
Uh-oh.
Did it drop or was it destroyed? Because it was in a freighter or something, right?
It was in a freighter.
So it wasn't technically destroyed?
Oh, no, heavens no. And it was scooped. It wasn't just left there for whatever. No, they scooped it. They got it.
Well, first, let's say what a Marshall is for people who maybe not know.
A ship I need in my life.
On the basic level, it's a faction battleship. There are other faction battleships. Macarial comes to mind, but this one, the faction is Concord. It's one of the decommissioned Concord ships. What are the others in that series?
The Pacifier and
Purifier.
Purifier is the
that's the Purifier. Never mind.
It's the Pacifier and Enforcer.
Enforcer, that's it.
Okay, so this is sort of the third in that series, and it's breathtakingly cool at the moment. It's very, very chic. If you buy them on the market in JITA, I've seen them go for the price of a supercarrier. Well, but the supercarriers are cheap in Delve at the moment, so that's hard. They're just really expensive.
One thing to remember is that this is effectively a limited term early release. This is not like a Gnosis that gets occasional limited releases, and it's not like an AT ship that only gets released on the tournament. We're getting them early, a couple of them, but to my knowledge, and this could be wrong, they said that they are eventually going to be able to be makeable through like Project Discovery rewards or something like that.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's
so they're not going to be expensive for long. So if you want to make money, sell now.
Yeah, I think the highest price I've seen them going for is about 35 bill.
I know a couple of dudes who sold them for around 20, 25.
25 still. That's
this particular neutral freighter pilot was piloting his Obelisk through the 0.6 security system of ICAO, and was in the Citadel is the name of the region, and he was going through the Cameo Stargate, and Minilove, the Ministry of Love, which we need to explain who they are. Mm-hmm. They scanned him, saw what was in him, giggled, bumped him, and then killed him.
How long did they how long they bump him, because bumping is a way of holding something in place until you can get your guys with guns over to you.
Well, the way they work is they send out scouts to look for good targets, and then when they find one, they bump them and while they do a couple things. They check the identity of the pilot against a restricted data list built into the Imperium software, so that they can check to say, is this guy a known alt of a blue guy? Then we don't want to kill him, type thing. So if one of the benefits of being in the Imperium is you can put your out of alliance alts into the system with an API key, and the Ministry of Love won't kill them on ganking. So they'll check his identity on a list. And then after that, they go say, okay, everybody, go to this system and align to this gate and blah, blah, blah. And then they go and gank him. It's organized. It's a lot of fun, actually. More fun than I'm making it sound.
You're doing
I didn't think it would be that fun until the first Burn Jita, where I made an alt and put it in the system with everyone else and ran around and did it. And I go, holy cow, this is fun.
Yeah. Well, we should have Apple Pear, who's a friend of the show, on to talk about it. He was there when it happened. But maybe we'll talk about it next time. So this thing drops worth $25 billion, big payday. It it's the first one of its type to be captured, and these things are distributed already to people individually.
Yeah, and if you went to FanFest and eVegas, so you had to go to both events, you got one, and only one.
Oh, right, because didn't they have a huge... This wasn't the ship that created a big stir. It was one of these. Yeah,
it was ones before that.
Yeah, it was the Pacifier and the Enforcer. CCP just totally screwed up. They did stuff that they said that they weren't going to do, and yeah, they gave out like way too many.
Thousands.
That was part of early summer's blunders, I guess you could say, or just missteps that created a lot of. I don't know if there was a lot, but people. Yeah,
that was one of the instigators to the summer of mild discontent.
That's right. Not quite the summer of rage, but people were a little bit upset. And we're getting near the end of the year, so we're going to do an episode that looks back on the entire year. We should maybe do a 2-hour special on that. What do you think?
A 2-hour special on the summer of mild discontent?
No. On the year, like a year.
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, just to, because it's interesting. You think like nothing's really happening, and then you see like at FanFest one of the videos that CCP makes about what's been developed that year in EVE, and you're like, oh yeah, it's just huge, like the amount of stuff they do, but it doesn't feel like it's like a slow boil. So we'll do the same thing with player news and stuff. All right, so that's that. So the other, what else is going on out there in nullsec?
I just want to tag one onto the Marshall, and a big shout out to my friend Nikolai, who actually lost the first one, like in a legit combat fight. He ended up getting ganked by a bunch of guys in Namamalia. I say ganked, it's low sec, so ganking is technical. But yeah, he got caught, he lost it, and it got tweeted out by Falcon as the one that was first lost, and good play for him for flying it like he stole it and losing the first one.
I like that term, flying it like he stole it.
I don't think those are the biggest news. I mean, that's one ship. Like,
yep.
Whoa! But we also have the final Keepstar timer coming up. Solar Keepstar in KZ9 on Monday, which I think will be a pretty interesting one. The second timer was really boring, which is why it probably didn't get a lot of attention, but it's a pretty important timer because a lot of things happened. And yeah, I'm pretty excited for that one.
What's the significance of it in terms of the ongoing conflict?
Yeah, so explain a bit about the setup for all of this. because this was the next section of the show, which was just to go in what's been going on in Nullsec over the last couple of weeks. So what's the setup for this Keepstar? How has this been playing out over the last week or so?
Okay, so basically Tri and the DRF have been fighting for a while. Once so FCON has died, FCON has been killed by Tri and PL and some other people that were involved. And now Tri decided to, instead of taking a break from war, they decided to go, keep going. And they went after Solar. They've been pretty successful so far. They have killed the majority of citadels they've attacked and stuff like that. And now they decided to sort of go for the final push, or like sort of, to make like a decisive blow. And they reinforced the Solar Keepstar on a Monday last week. And then on the Tuesday, there was the second timer, but Tri basically committed all their big assets. They put all their supers, titans, and shit on grid there, or at least their supers. They didn't put all the titans in. And at the DRF decided not to engage, or I think they wanted to engage. Apparently there were some mistakes in the FC team or something. That's at least what I was told. And basically the Keepstar got into final reinforce. Which is obviously a good thing for the DRF, because the DRF is really good at diplomatics. Now they can bad phone a whole lot of people. They already managed to pay off one big player, which is the GOTG, which is kind of interesting. After the whole DRF GOTG thing in the northern DRF hemisphere, the GOTG has been helping Tri sort of with the timer, and on the second Keepstar timer, the GOTG actually showed up with like 180 people in confessors and shit like that, so that was pretty good. But then on like the day after the like reinforcement timer, Sword Dragon just sort of dropped the Sword Dragon sort of like told in the coordination Discord, he was like, well guys, I don't want to no bad blood or anything, but we've got other plans now. And then he pieced out with all his FC. So we'll see what happens on the final timer if GOTG fights with the DRF on the final timer, which is likely, or if they just pulled out. Either way, I think could get really interesting. If Tri decide to put all their assets on grid again, I think the Russians are really eager to drop this time. So I think something will happen. And if there's one large supercap fleet involved, there has to be a second one. So we'll see. Maybe it will escalate into some big fight.
So where's that Monday fight?
KZ9. It's on the ass end of nowhere of New Eden. I'm not even sure what region. I think it's Detroit, but it's KZ9. Yeah, that's gonna be a big one.
That is indeed Detroit. Yep.
You weren't being sarcastic about DRF having good diplomats, were you?
No. I mean, good diplomats. That's not what I see. I said they're good at they're good at diplomatics. Sort of. They're good at. I held this presentation. Good. Yeah. So if in my eyes, the DRF are the diplomatic superpower of New Eden, because their main strength is the money and how they use it, and how they like pay off people, how they hire people to fight for them, and stuff like that.
So what's your take on the end of the war there? Because they did get invaded from two fronts, the south and the north. What's your take on that whole thing?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think it's an invasion. Like, what happened in the north wasn't a proper invasion. That was like a show of force. In my opinion, a proper invasion looks differently. Nobody would start an invasion on a DIF without making sure that they would win it beforehand and getting the people involved they need to win it. And they weren't ready for that. So, yeah.
I mean, you say that, but when the DRF is already fighting to protect their allies down in the south, and there are a number of entities sort of jumping on the bandwagon there, then I don't think there are many entities left to call on if you're looking for allies to join the war on GOTG's side.
Yes, they are. No major forces, no NCPL forces were actually committed on either of the fronts.
Yeah.
So
if you're going to win and sustain the win, you need more than an invasion. I think we talked about this already, but it did seem like it was, let's wake up the guys, give them something to do from the darkness point of view. But I also think it was pretty It's pretty ballsy because they put a lot on the table, right? They put the Keepstar on the table and they brought their Supercap fleet and jumped it in. So it wasn't just an incursion, was it?
Boat and XDeath talked about this last week on the Meta Show, because Boat on the Meta Show last week he had UXDeath, the leader of XIX, or one of the leaders of XIX, and they talked about this. There's nobody to occupy that space besides the DRF. The problem in EVE right now with Phoebe and everything, and with the lack of players that EVE has, the space is just too big. There's too much space to hold. And even if GOTG were to actually invade the DRF, and if they had succeeded in, like, whatever, if they took that one region, Paragon Falls, right? Who would they move in there? There's nobody left to move in there. They probably could, like, offer some of the former renters to, keep their space and then just pay GOTG instead of paying the XIX, right? That's probably something you could do. But a lot of people aren't going to do that. And also, that space is constantly going to be under attack. So unless you're willing to commit to open up another front and commit to that long term, there's no point in expanding your empire. It's a mistake that, Goons didn't make that mistake when Fazizov was out and shit like that. But basically, you have to be very careful with how big you make your empire. Otherwise, it becomes very.
I think that's true, but
vulnerable.
right now everything seems to be tainted with this idea that stations are going to flip, basically become something that you can pick up and take with you. And it seems like that kind of colors a lot of the conflicts. Like, is this
not really
to get position?
No, but that's been delayed until at least summer 2018. So nobody really cares about that anymore. That was a thing. When it still stood, that it was supposed to be released this winter instead of the December 5 patch that we're now getting with the alphas and stuff like that. That's what when they wanted to originally swap stations and citadels, and then it would have mattered, because that would that can be a really good cash grab potentially, but that's been scrapped and delayed until at least summer. So nobody is gonna take space 6 months in advance just for the stations. That's just not worth it.
Because with Aegisov, Fozisov, or whatever you want to call it, you have to be able there to maintain the space and live in it in order to make it difficult to assault. If not, you're just going to be spending all your time defending timers. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah,
technically, yes, but there's also not a lot of people that actually harass and use the mechanics of Fazizov, which is why Fazizov is such a big failure, because it's just not doing what Fuzzy think, or like his team thought it would do. Like, people said when Aegisov was announced, renters are dead because everybody can just go. Like, why would the renters pay? And like, when they can just take the space on their own, nobody can actually defend it anymore. And right now, we basically have as big of a renting empire going on in EVE Online as we had with Bot. So it's like absolutely nothing has changed.
It certainly does feel like that. Like, the renting hasn't gone away. And people keep saying, oh, renting is going away, rent as a business model. I don't know if I can't tell. It doesn't seem like it's declining at all.
It's expanding.
It's not declining at all. Like, at least in terms of what I can tell you from WeRMT perspective, which is the NCPL renting empire that we are currently maintaining in the north, we've had a boom in renters recently. Like, we've had basically all systems of Tino, Tribute, and Veil of the Silent that are open for rent, which is all of them, are taken. There's no single system available. I think there's like 2 or 3 systems in Tribute that are open for rent. The rest is completely taken.
Yeah, but they're on pipes. You don't want to live there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
like, for example, I rented a pipe system now because nobody else was rented.
Well, you're the only guy that could, though.
Yeah, exactly. Because
anything happens to you, anybody jumps you can call in like the cavalry. You're one of the few guys that can do that.
Are you kidding me? It's fun to jump on Killa.
Oh, please do. I mean,
yeah, it works out great when you do it with a bunch of dreads. Try it.
Well, there's an implicit advantage in living into a pipe system, which is that if your neighbors in all the pockets surrounding you are your allies, you have guaranteed content as anybody who tries to engage you goes through your home.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what That's a whole other story. That's a whole like the Rorqual mining problematic, which honestly I don't want to talk about because the conversation that we had about yesterday escalated into this gigantic spurge fest of like people. I don't want to talk about it.
Don't go. It's traumatic.
Wow. PTSD from a conversation about Rorquals.
But is the whole rental empires and the growth, or at least the maintaining of them, is that a signal that diplomacy is actually working and important in the Neve?
I'd say
It's
it is, yeah.
I mean, it's questionable how much you attribute that to diplomacy. Here's the thing, right? One thing that people like get me wrong on is I'm not saying diplomacy is bad. I'm saying most diplomats are bad, and that's because they don't like you said earlier. Basically, a diplomat should be a person that can say yes without having to to ask anyone else before. But that's just not the case for most diplomats in EVE Online, because at the end of the day, the final word for the Imperium, is being made by the Mittani. So it doesn't matter how high of a diplomat you are in the Imperium, you technically still have to go to the Mittani to ask for a final decision. And then, like somebody else also said, obviously, for example, Lady Scarlet as well, she knows what Vince is going to agree to because she's been working with Vince for such a long time. So at the end of the day, Lady Scarlet can say yes or no to a lot of things on her own without having to ask Vince. But at the end of the day, the final call is still Vince's. And that's what I don't like about diplomats, because in EVE, it all comes down to the person that can actually make a difference. And most diplos cannot make a difference because it's either the FCs or the actual alliance leaders that make the difference. Because like the FCs are the people that actually fight the battles. Like I said, there's exceptions, definitely. There has been very important diplomats, for example, during World War B and stuff like that.
Judge.
And obviously, yeah, well, okay. And also, and also, like you said, right now, the expanse of this current Renta Empire obviously involves some agreements of some sort and stuff that also need the diplomatic work. And those diplos that have worked these deals out, are really important. But I'm really cautious about diplos, because if you don't watch out, then you have people like Jay, whatever his name was, stepping up and pretending to be best friends with everybody and sort of talking to everybody behind everybody's back and just basically making a mess. Because at the end of the day, all that guy ever did was causing drama and almost like causing a war, or basically causing a war.
Well, he did manage to get a bunch of personalities on the Manny Bothans show, which was pretty cool. He got he got XX Death, he got Manfred Sidious, he got Lady Scarlet, got even Travis, FC for NC was, I forget who else, but he had connections. He knew these people enough to get them on a show, it's a thing that's a sign of how much influence you have with people. But it didn't translate, I guess.
I had like 2 conversations with that guy. One where he like introduced himself to me, and I've never heard of the guy before. And I was like, cool, seems like XIX or the DRF has a new head diplo or something. And then like the other conversation where he tried to convince me of some sort of plan that apparently Vince and Elise had already agreed on. And I just went to Vince and Elise and asked them, yo, guys, like, what's up with this guy? Like, he told me this was going to happen. And they're like, we've never talked to the guy before. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I basically told him to fuck off. And that's the only 2 conversations I ever had with that guy. Because I knew at that moment, when he told me that somebody had agreed to something and he had never even talked about them, that guy was just full of shit.
Well, I think that was his style of working. I'm not defending him, but it's more like you say, hey, this guy already agreed to it. Then you go to the other person and say, hey, this other guy already agreed to it. And then both of them think they already agreed to it. And then they end up in this situation that neither one of them actually would have agreed to on their own. But I bet that's how he got people on the show too, saying, hey, I got this show and these people are going to be on it. And then you say that to every one of them and they all think, well, it's legitimate because these other big names are going to be on it, so I could show up to that. But when that happened, I had teased Lady Scarlet a bit, because I said it looks like Fred Flintstone in that giant set of ribs that falls on the car. That's like the ribs are too big for the car, so it tips the car over. That you had way too much personality and gravitas on Manny Bothan's show, which is a very casual conversational show, about low-sec adventures or wormhole adventures or whatever. So it just seemed completely out of place. It was like a clown car. You had too many people in this tiny little vessel of a show. That was just Media Wars. We'll get off that topic. But yeah, so that's probably his style of being a Diplo too. How do we end up back in Diplo land? Well, we were talking about DRF, right?
I actually have an interesting question since we're talking about block politics and stuff. Do you think that EVE deserves, otherwise wants a big war?
I don't like big wars. I like campaigns with meaning, but big wars I don't know why I'm entering this. I guess I want to. It seems like EVE gets a lot smaller when everybody's in the same place.
I think that's a really important point as well, because EVE ultimately is all driven by the interactions between groups and the people within those groups. And so getting people on board to go into a campaign to go fight a battle with some form of meaning or some sort of end goal is infinitely easier than just let's all go and have a fight for no real particular reason. The perfect example of that was World War B, Casino Wars, whatever. Everybody kind of piled into it, but everybody wanted to pile into that and get involved into that fight. And at the same time, campaigns, when you run them and you have people logging in to do it, you've got to keep them coming back. And so it's always good to have meaning. And I think these interactions between people, which can happen between diplomats, but I think happens probably more between fleet commanders more than anything else, is probably the best sort of war that goes on.
It can be a lot of
this
fun.
Question.
Let's
go around the board on this. Go ahead.
But a big war is a lot of work for the FCs and some of the other folks. It's amazing. The scouts, the recon teams, some of the logistics work their butts off for a very long period of time on those. But they are great fun. I agree. And there is a I'm not an economics expert, but I feel like there is a beneficial aspect to the destruction of the war in terms of the EVE economy.
Yeah, but to reiterate what I was saying, it seems like I work as an artist, or did, and you had a portfolio as an artist. You show somebody your work, saying this is what I'm capable of, and it's actually more important what you keep out of your portfolio than what you put into it. That's the perception is that you're good, and as soon as you see something that looks awful, you're like, well, you're not that good. You must have gotten lucky this other time. So in that same sense, EVE is like, to me, EVE is like that, in that if you have, I think I lost my point, but basically you don't want to have bad wars. You want to have a series of good wars. That's how I see it, because that's what keeps people kind of hanging around. I know this in this era of like, wow, EVE had, huge battles. I want to be a part of that everybody wants to be in these huge battles, but those really aren't the long-term, I think those are not the long-term battles you want for a game like this. You want either small or mid-sized or big campaigns that people kind of like work at and then relax, and then work at and then relax. I think we're in a period of relaxation kind of now, aren't we?
I definitely
Some
think
groups are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Artemis? What do you think of this?
I think you have to separate the health of the game from the health of any individual organization. So certainly your argument is valid that it's unhealthy for a particular organization to have a bad war. But if a war is going to have a decisive ending, then somebody's got to lose. And I don't think you could say in any stretch of the imagination that someone losing a war is bad for the health of the game.
Yeah, but what about the types of wars like you see a war and it's building up and it's going to be great and you're going to have months of content, and then the judge turns and sells out and CO2 implodes and there goes the war.
And you get a great piece on PC Gamer, a couple of people join the game, leave a few months later, and everything goes back to normal.
Pretty much.
You need Mata Haris in a game like this.
And that seems like a lot of the battles. There seems to be a huge amount of hype, even before Casino War, World War B. I hate saying all that together. Even before that, you had NC attacking the Imperium in Fountain, and that kept looking like it was going to turn into something. It turned into nothing, and that almost is. It's not worse, but it kept people doing stuff. But I think when it doesn't turn into something, it feels like it's the game isn't what it used to be. Like it short circuits itself before the actual combat gets going, before the campaigns go, before the big move ops and stuff like that. I don't know, something like that. All right, you guys write your opinions there in chat if you want to participate. If you guys like one big war, or do you like, or not? Do you think it's healthy or not? That's an interesting question. All right, moving on. So what's going on in the South? Is there anything like, speaking of campaigns, are there any campaigns afoot? It looked like there was just a big fight in Providence. And I'm not sure if it's the same battle. No, in Detroit, Fraternity seems to be coming up a lot, right? That name seems to be surfacing a lot. They're having a lot of battles against Horde, and who are they fighting now? Like Test, I think.
Yeah, sort of everybody around that area. I mean, everybody not aligned with them. Fraternity are. I think that there was a show like just on them. Something, I don't know. Maybe it was another show. I'm not sure, but basically, it's a very big group of Chinese people that are sort of migrating over from Serenity to TQ because Serenity sucks dick. All right, sorry, I'm swearing too much and I say too much, but this is an adult show. But sorry. Anyways, so yeah, they like kind of they're swapping servers, and obviously that's a very interesting thing because they don't have skill points. Most of their players don't have skill points. Now there is skill injectors around, but these people don't have money either, which is, because they haven't been playing on TQ. So now obviously they're grinding a lot. They're mining a lot. They are ratting a lot to make money to be able to inject characters. Right now you see Fraternity form 400 people pretty easily in their prime time, if not more.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, those are in Tempests, T1 Tempests, because they can't fly anything else. But give it a year, and you will have all those people in carriers, dreads, and actual battleships that aren't Tempests. So yeah, I mean, I really like the fact that they're coming over. I think it's kind of fun because whenever I told friends about EVE in the past, I was like, well, you have all these people on one server. You have Russians, you have Americans, you have Germans, and whenever, like, I could never say you have Chinese people because they had their own server. Now they're sort of playing on our server. I'm not sure, like, I'm pretty sure it's not legal for them, but whatever. So anyways, it's fun that they're around. I'm hoping that they can establish themselves, and I'm really looking forward to see what they're up to. And they're definitely, you can ask all Horde FCs. They always say FRT guys are crazy because there was this one brawl that Horde had with FRT. It was like a fight that was basically stretching on over like 3 or 4 hours. Both sides kept dying, kept reshipping, kept bringing other doctrines to counter the other one before. It was like a 4-hour fight that just kept like going up and down. And yeah, they're very eager to take part in the TQ politics.
One of the important things to not lose sight of in Fraternity, kind of gaining a bunch of players from Serenity, is that Fraternity did exist before this surge of Chinese players. They've always kind of been this to some extent with a much smaller group of players. So for example, I remember even when I was FCing Waffles years and years ago, that Fraternity, like, it was always cool to fight them in their own weird special way, and they've even had a pretty reasonable Alliance tournament team for a while. So don't let it be forgotten to the annals of history that Fraternity isn't just this group of Serenity players moving over. It's a long-standing Chinese group of players on Tranquility that have recently benefited from a boom of Serenity players. Like, they have a long history before what's happening there.
Yeah, that's true. I actually worked with them when I was in Noli. FRT was one of our stronger allies back then. So yeah, definitely a cool group.
What is going on with that? We keep hearing about the Chinese server. For those that don't know, EVE Online is basically a game played by people all over the world, except in China, where they have a separate server, and they've had it that way because of government regulations, I believe, from China.
Yeah.
allowed. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so in the briefest of nutshells, essentially CCP licenses EVE Online to a Chinese company called Tian City, I think. And they provide the EVE Online servers within China to people in China. But they are able to run the server. So they basically have the same rights as you and I buying a copy of Windows almost. They can add in things they want to, so they have a whole bunch of different skins and things like that. But as far as I understand it, the Chinese server has not been updated for over a year now. So they're actually like a year behind their update, like pre-Rorqual changes we're talking about here as well.
Yeah, that's the actual reason though. They decided not to put the Rorqual changes onto Serenity because there were, well, I mean, I guess we all
Rorqual plus Chinese labor in the game would be, well,
it is. It's always an issue with Chinese groups being very efficient and very good at farming and then selling their farmed stuff. I mean, I remember buying WoW gold from fucking Chinese bot websites or some shit like that. So, yeah. They basically didn't patch the Rorqual patch in because for some reason, but it seems pretty obvious to me why. And that's also one of the main reasons they really wanted to swap over because the Chinese players really got annoyed of the fact that their server was always behind TQ and they really just wanted to play the up-to-date content and not like be a year behind.
Well, that beforehand, it only used to be like maybe 1 or 2 patches behind, but now it's gone on way longer than it ever has done before. And we're seeing the effect of that.
So you're not saying they're coming over to use the Rorqual to do gold mining, basically?
No.
All right.
No. I'm saying that they're coming over because they're tired of not being able to play the current content. And also because the Serenity politics are really, really boring and really, like, there's nothing going on. Like, if you think the 2 blue donuts and TQ are bad, you should open up the coalition map of Serenity. And that is actually bad.
By the way, isn't that just like
there's
2 groups?
Alliances. Yeah, there's two alliances basically that control one side of the map and the other group controls the other side, and that's it. Like, there's just nothing going on. So
I've seen pictures of Serenity players, like they have EVE tattoos or something on Facebook, like some legit good-looking people.
And the most frustrating thing about the fact that they have Tian City running the Chinese server is that they've got loads of people making really awesome merchandise. Like, there's a whole Chinese company building scale models of all sorts of things, and we can't get them. Just can't get them. Well, so frustrating.
Yeah, they would. You know, I think originally when CCP built this game, the intention was everyone would try to play on the same server. But in China, you need to have a license to operate an MMORPG server, and they want their folks separate from the rest of they don't want them mixing with the rest of the world. So you have to they make you legally run a separate server over there, and to do that, to get the permit to run it, you need to have a Chinese partner. So they looked around for a partner, and they picked Tian City and worked with them. So they can't just. That's why Tian City has the ability to say, oh, okay, not the Rorqual changes, we're not going to do that, or let's add these cool skins into the game. Go for it, Artemis.
Oh, I was, but he just got hit by a tornado alarm, so he's away from his desk at the moment.
Lord.
Wow.
That's a horrible.
Noisy? What do you think? I know. Noisy, what do you think?
Yeah, the whole thing about needing to partner up with a Chinese company is it's basically goes beyond games. It goes with everything. If you want to do business in China, you have to have a Chinese partner. The one geopolitical twist, and this is EVE, so we have to have politics involved. The one geopolitical twist here is that the Chinese government really wants to get in well with the Icelandic government due to, I guess, oil exploration in the Arctic Circle. And so the Chinese government's trying to do things for like CCP, because that way that maybe the Icelandic people will think better of them. That also goes to why CCP has a studio in Shanghai, because of these kind of laws and stuff like that. But the whole relationship between China and Iceland gets a little bit interesting if you get into it.
Well, it's worth mentioning that Tencent, the company we mentioned, they are insanely huge. This is not a minor company. This is probably one of the biggest companies in the world, especially in the Eastern world. Like, they own significant shares in Activision Blizzard and EA. They run Alibaba, which is effectively like the East Asian Amazon.
It's estimated they're bigger than
Are you getting them mixed up with Tencent?
Is it not the same company?
No.
But they have such... Oh, that's a confusing name switch.
Tien City and Tencent are separate.
Sorry, my mistake.
But you're right that there is some kind of interesting thing between China and Iceland. When I worked for CCP and would run, I made one trip over to the Shanghai office to go work on some stuff there, and running around in China and talking to people, I would say that I was visiting from Iceland, which in Chinese is Bingdao, ice island.
Bingdao.
Bingdao. And everyone knew what it was. And I'm thinking, it's a tiny island on the Arctic Circle. Why would these people know where it was? But they all knew what it was and had a positive opinion. It's very funny.
Wow. By the way, Potha, you have great comic timing. I could hear it in that response. That was perfect. So it's interesting. So it's not that because there's rumors going all over the place that Chinese servers closing and everybody's migrating over. But really, it looks like they're just falling so far behind that people are possibly moving to Tranquility to just get more of the actual features that EVE has to offer that are newer. That makes sense.
If I can, as much as that was kind of amusing, the confusion between Tencent and Tencent, Chan City and Tencent, there is actually a rumor floating that Tencent is one of the interested parties in buying CCP.
Oh, the plot thickens. Artemis, did you have something you wanted to say now that your tornado warning is over?
It's a little bit off topic, but the interesting thing to me is with an influx of Chinese players, the time zone of the bulk of Fraternity's player base, it's going to stay relatively the same based on their previous members, but certainly they're going to be getting much stronger in a time zone which, to my knowledge, they don't have very many rivals. So with the Citadel changes coming in Citadel's 2.0, that's not going to be as big of an issue, but certainly when you're talking solve timers and things like that, it's going to be very important. So does anybody have any opinions or know for certain how the interaction is going to play out?
Well, Chinese time zone is sufficiently close to Australian time zone that AUTZ may not necessarily be the safe time zone everyone times their shit to anymore, because the Chinese will come fuck you up.
The Chinese are coming.
Well, that's what we talked about, because in the last show we had CCP dev Nagwal on, and he was saying, see, we did all these changes to timers to satisfy the crowd, and now you have this huge influx of people in the Australian time zone, so the changes they made are actually now obsolete if these players come and fill in that time zone. So it's interesting how, and this was the theme of the last show, unintended consequences of how things are supplanted by other things that were completely unforeseen. So what looks like a paradigm that is unbeatable, like say the Imperium right now, right? They're making money, they're reinforcing their territory. That looks unbeatable to everybody, can completely get undermined by something that nobody's even conceived of yet. I thought that was interesting. Right. By the way, was that a tornado warning?
No, it was just a test of the system, but didn't want to ruin the audio here.
Oh, but you have, because we have earthquake warnings now. They're not that effective, but...
I'm in the Midwest, so we're just outside Tornado Valley, but the systems are all still in place because it's not unlikely to happen.
What is
Yeah.
an earthquake warning? Like, do the sirens go off when it's already shaking? It's like, yeah, no shit. Thank you for the warning. Or,
I'm stuck under something heavy. Thanks.
yeah.
No, it's I know that Mexico City had a warning when the huge earthquake went off their coast, and the sensors picked up the activity in the local area and were able to transmit before the earthquake energy actually hit Mexico City by like a full, minute to 90 seconds or something like that, which was a big deal. But
Now, yeah. I'm just wondering, it's like, because I think this also may affect Iceland, because earthquakes can be a precursor to volcanic eruptions.
Right.
And I know that Mexico City had a really bad one back when I was growing up. And so, it might be more important just for that, so people can like just start running away from the volcano.
Yeah, my aunt died in that one. It was 1986, I think, or 84, one of those two. She was in the hospital that collapsed. She was a nurse. Oh, I'm sorry to bring the show down. Sorry, Noisy. What were you saying?
No, that was it. It was just anytime that you get to talk about earthquakes, it always brings into mind Iceland, because they have a lot.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to bring it back onto Eve things and just say, with the climb of fraternity, which is pretty interesting. How do we think that's going to be affecting the meta down in the south?
Immediate, not too much. They are like right now, they're literally just a big meat shield, and that's not because they're bad or anything. It's just because they are just not at the point where the other alliances are. So, for example, on the big KZ9 IHUB fight, that was actually a fight over a Fazizov timer, which was amazing. There was a big brawl going on, and basically, I think FRT lost like 100 Tempests, which is nothing because they're cheap as hell, right? But they basically just shielded. They just kept like losing Tempests while Tri was killing Solar and XIX Macarials. So that's a pretty good trade-off, and that's what they are currently. And that's not an offense or anything. It's just what they are. But I think when they have money, when they have skill points, I think they'll be a big powerhouse. I think it's fair to say that the time zone is somewhat of an issue because, their time zone is very specific and there's basically no rivals in that time zone at all. But they can project pretty decent power into AUTZ, and they can project pretty decent power into European time zone as well, because Chinese people are very committed and they like to alarm clock and stay up for timers and stuff like that. So I think while they will probably not have any contests in their main time zone, I think they will be also a factor in other time zones, unless obviously, which also is likely to happen at some point, they have some internal drama and maybe then the alliance splits in half and then you'll have some sort of Chinese rivalry there. But we'll see if that happens.
If you didn't catch it, by the way, fraternity is not independently aligned diplomatically. They are friends with the NCPL side of the equation.
Yes.
So even though a lot of their members are relatively new to Tranquility, they're not just arriving and looking around and going, okay, who can we shoot?
They're friends of Killer Bees.
Exactly.
Right? You're doing some diplomacy with them, Killer Bees?
It's mainly Rico, and Rico is Rico Hita. He's a Chinese guy in NC Dot, and he was the main FC, and I think he even was not actually. I think Wind Spirits has always been the CEO, but Rico was definitely the main FRT fleet commander back when I worked with him in Noli. So we knew each other from back then. And Rico right now is doing a lot of the NC FRT diplomacy because obviously he speaks their language and he knows them from way back. He knows Wind Spirits. Wind Spirits is a very chill guy. I love working with the Chinese. They're very positive people, and they're always in a good mood. That's at least what it feels like to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we had some. I guess they weren't Chinese though. They were from. Where were the guys from in DICE? Tiberius.
Guys from in DICE.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank, but they're great. They were always on, There was two of them. One was from Vancouver, but
Americans.
Trying to blank. This is really bad because they were around only. Well, I guess it was when we were invading.
If they're from Vancouver, which is where I live, it's very highly likely that they're Chinese.
Yeah, I lived there for a year. It's like a lot of people there are from Chinese descent. All right, so I don't know if we finished going around the board, but we know there's going to be a big fight in Detroit. I keep saying Detroit. Detroit, and that is going to happen on Monday over at Keepstar. DRF seems to be settling in after post-war invasions. What was Triumvirate up to? They were fighting somebody recently, weren't they?
Yeah, FCON. They killed FCON together with some other groups, and then now, I'm just gonna say they killed FCON. There's probably some FCON grunt in Twitch chat right now. I was like, we're still alive in Ethereum Reach. We're strong. We formed 20-man fleet.
Holding up the flag.
Yeah. But that's basically that. And then I personally didn't like the move of Tri. I basically went to Archer and told him like, yo, maybe you should take a little break after this. Why would you just go right after the next thing? But they're their own man. They can make their own decisions, and decided to go for Solar right after. And I mean it's been working well for them. Tri is fielding amazing numbers. If you look at their line size and what they actually bring on the field, you got to give them some props.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
With FCON down, is Solar relatively geographically isolated from DRF or other possible allies?
They're the most southern element of the DRF currently, you could say. Not directly isolated. Everything north of actually, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really very familiar on the drone politics, geo fucking whatever. But let me check Dotland.
Yeah.
It's in Smother that they're fighting over, right? Which I'm not sure if it's an isolated region, but I'm pretty sure it's just you can reach it pretty easily.
So the folding of FCON was something I kind of missed. What was do we know what the straw was that broke the camel's back in respect to that? Because FCON have been around for a long time, and now they've gone from 3,000 members to just under 500.
Yeah,
well, they used to be Imperium Clusterfuck Coalition Alliance for the longest time, right?
Well, before that they were Pravi. So they started out in Pravi, then they moved into CFC, which turned into the Imperium, and then they left the Imperium. Over a period of about 5 years, so 6 years.
Yeah, so they've been a constant thing, and it's this one particular war has been the thing that's broken their back, effectively.
Well, is this the first time they've been involved in a major war and not been part of a massive coalition? I mean, Phoenix, maybe, but that's not exactly the same as being a member of the Imperium or whatever.
Oh, so you're saying without protection?
They were a major part of when Test and CO2 initially moved down to the south. So this is not their first major engagement sort of post-World War B and Imperium alliances. Well,
and during the Casino War, World War B, there was... They would show up with 500 people. Of course, that was early on when morale was high.
There was one timer, and that one timer was the defense of their staging IHOP.
Okay, so they were capable of it.
Is this their first major loss, not as a coalition member? Then is that accurate to say?
I don't know.
Major loss. It's also their last loss, right? Because they're done.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it's the first one.
Maybe we should go ahead, Kilby.
I was just gonna say, I FCON has never really been on my radar or anything because they've never been relevant enough on their own to for me to be interesting. So it was always the coalition that we're a part of, and I did not take Phoenix coalition or whatever. I did not take them serious. So I don't think that FCON ever really mattered, at least in my time. Because one thing that just completely baffled me about FCON is they had all these numbers available, they had all these people available, this manpower, and they just refused to build a supercap fleet. Even in the age of raw golds, in the age of what we have right now, they were just not capable of building up a super fleet. And the way they worked diplomatically just made me lose all respect for them, because they were so scared of everything. They always came up with these tinfoil plots how PL was going to invade them soon, which is why they needed to have all these allies, which is the reason why they ended up like working with Test and CO2 is because they were so scared of a PL invading them or someone, and they needed more allies and stuff like that. So they were just always very scared and very weird, and they never built up a super fleet, and that's why I just can't respect them or never
that
did.
DRF Diplo came out of FCON, Jay Maricady.
Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah, I don't know if you know that. He's affiliated with them before.
No, I did not know that, but that's not surprising at all.
Yeah, I just think FCON, at least, I always thought they were pretty good. And they're good at other things, but they seem to be more PvE-ish, just kind of building society. And
they're amazing to farm as like a small gang. Like, oh my god, they are so good to farm. They're like one of the best. If you wanted to go on like a farming holiday, like FCON, way better than even Providence.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. So Providence, SMA, and FCON, to me, have the reputations of being a place you want to go and fight 3 or 4 of them and win and feel like a champion kind of thing. By yourself. I don't know. I know that Grath wanted to stomp him out like insects. He was like his whole life was about killing FCON for a while.
No, his whole life was about farming them. He never wanted them to die because they were so easy to farm.
No, but he was legit mad at them because they kept saying how great they were, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill you." Anyway, okay, so that pretty much is around the board. It was kind of messy, but there's a lot of smoldering areas that have been through war that are kind of like positioning themselves now. But there's still some activity going on. And it looks like Test and Brave, they seem to be active. Things are going on there, although I don't know exactly what big fights are happening. But on the other side, we have in Fountain area, Jurius, you wanted to talk about Atlas, name from the past?
Yeah, definitely a name from the past.
What's going on with, I didn't even know they were back.
Well, what version 7.5? It's interesting. So Atlas a little while ago moved into the space that had been vacated by Pixels when Pixels and TC evacuated or pulled out of Fountain, and it's made it interesting because we've had different neighbors come and go as Iron Armada, and they moved into Old Pixel space, and with another group that was in the area and a secondary one who came in after the fact, they ended up, making a bit of a home for themselves, and because they were our neighbors, we opened up a diplomatic agreement with them that basically was a basic nip. We're going to reserve the right to roam into your space, and you guys can bring fleets into ours, and we'll have good content, and we'll try not to farm you too much, but you don't hit structures and you don't engage in certain types of content, and we'll leave you alone. And they didn't do that, and more's the pity for them, because they look them up on Dotland, them dank slopes, man. They started off with like 1,600 people, and I think they're down to almost 400.
What did they do that caused it? I'm unaware of how it started. I'm aware of the conflict going on, but I don't know how it started.
Well, it started off with them coming into the space and forming a small scale alliance coalition. What do you want to call it? At that size, I don't think the titles actually matter as much. But they formed a blue relationship with a group called Wild Hunt that are also blue with us. Now, we weren't blue with Atlas directly, but we said we'll stay out of it because you guys are your friends, and we'll play it gentle here. And then they started to fight internally, and there was at some point an AWOX that happened, or the death of a particular ship, and we said, okay, hey, we're gonna say, look, there's this has gone down, and now we have your guys cloaky camping our space, which is expressly outlined as one of the things you don't do in our NIP, and if you keep it up, we're going to go to war. And they didn't listen, and we gave them a chance, and then we're like, well, now we're in full fuck mode.
Well, okay, so that is that's what's going on over there in, where is that? Purblind?
Fountain.
In Fountain, yeah.
Fountain. Okay, because I thought that was sold off by the culture to the Imperium.
It's
I mean,
more,
they have to install someone, right?
Hmm.
there's
No,
there's
like
a
I said,
thing
space
going
can't
on,
be empty.
Yeah. Cornelius?
which is true. You can't. Yeah, space can't be empty. You have to put someone there or do something with it. But there's this thing that's been going on in Quirius for a while that we were calling Quirius Fight Club, and I don't know how formal it is, but it was a thing going on where smaller alliances could come in and set up some space, and people were not all blue to each other, and they could do fights with each other, but we kept it at scale. And the Imperium were not allowed to go in with super cap fleets and or massive fleets and you know over antagonize them. I think we've talked about that on the show before, and people knew what we call it QFC, or Quirius Fight Club. Well, in recent times, especially after the departure of the culture, that's sort of spread over into Fountain now, and there's no one that calls it QFC there or Fountain Fight Club or anything like that, but it's kind of a similar arrangement where there are people who are living there, and we have some rules about what we can do, and don't go all crazy in their space, don't hit their structures, let them go, just for some context.
Yeah.
I think it's important to state that also Iron Armada, we maintain ourselves as an independent alliance. We're also one of only 2 groups in the game that keep a local mute, to the other, of course, being MC.
Have your diplomatic relations changed in the past 2 weeks? Because I have looking at your diplomatic update from about 2 weeks ago, where it pretty clearly states that you are at a NIP with the Imperium, which is not independent. If you have a NIP with someone, you're not independent.
That's not true. We've had OTAC and all kinds of NIPs of various sorts for like 900 years.
So a NIP is a non-invasion pact, which means don't take our space and we'll fight you, periodically. So there is conflict there. It's just not over anything meaningful.
There are lots of people who have agreements not to hit each other's structures, particularly in the wake of the Age of Sov.
Yeah, like Imperium's not blue to us. Like we just have an agreement that we're not going to get into a block fight over things. We're not going to come in and start trying to take space or hit structures. And we expect that it's more like a agreement of friendly enemies.
I mean, you do have to be careful when we're talking about not blue but friendly, because like MC and PL, we're not blue, but we both live in tribute together, at least to a certain extent. PL's a bit more in Veil of the Silent. So you could technically say that we're not allied and that we're neutral, but PL's not invading MC and MC's not invading PL, and for the most part we work together.
What's on paper is totally cemented, but there's a lot of allies that they don't put it on paper. It's just kind of a cultural, because the 2 leaders, know each other.
You have the North and the South, right? And there's groups that would just, like in my book, that will, like if there's ever going to be a North whereas a South fight, then the groups in Fountain will most likely side with the South, because if they don't, then, they'll get evicted after. And it's the same with other groups in the North that claim to be independent. They're not really independent, because if they don't do what we want them to, then they'll just get killed.
But the point, it seems to be necessary though. Like if Jarius's alliance wanted to be independent, how could they be?
Exactly. No, that's just I'm not criticizing the fact that they are. I just sort of just put the cards on the table. Don't try to be like we're strong, independent, and I don't want to shit talk Iron Armada. I actually have never fought you guys before. I don't think I've ever have done anything with you guys before, so it's no big deal. And like I said, we are in NCPL are involved in the same sort of diplomatic nets that you guys are in. I'm just saying it, put it on the table, right? There's no reason tiptoeing around the fact that I guess the Reddit F1 pusher would probably call it Goon Pet, and they probably also call like everybody that's like sort of friends with PLPL.
Highly inaccurate. Highly inaccurate.
Yeah, obviously it's highly
Are you
inaccurate.
spinning, Killer?
No, I'm just
I'll
saying.
shit talk Armada if
Yeah, well,
I
on that last one, I think Killa was talking about the perception on Reddit, which of course is 100% accurate.
Which is what I said. I said the Reddit F1 push. If you can't listen, then I'm sorry about that. But the basic fact is that like everybody helping or working with PL is being called a PL pet, and everybody helping or working with goons is being called a goon pet. That's just what the public sort of Reddit opinion is, and I think that's
meaningless.
Do you really
No,
think
it's
Reddit
not.
is meaningless? Reddit is half the reason your coalition almost died.
Yeah, it's not meaningless.
Like refounded into, so I wouldn't call it meaningless when it basically killed the unbeatable CFC. So yeah, I don't know about that one.
I agree with your sentiment though, Carneros, but it definitely is a tool and it can be used.
I'll say this. So one thing I'll say is that, like a lot of groups, and it's we come home for a while and we live and we crab and we make money and then we go on deployment, and that's where we find our fun because we're a PvP alliance. And it's one of those things where somebody comes to us with enough money and pays us for a contract, we'll go and do it. Yes, we're friendly, but not strongly and formally aligned with Imperium. But the same could be true of anybody. And the thing is that you get to a certain scale where unless you have the same numbers and the same economy as a group like NCPL or like Imperium, you're not considered as being separate. You're considered as being their pet de facto. And that's sort of something that's inevitable. People are going to call it that one way or another.
Well, listen, I'll get to the point of this, Jurius, because it seems like when you talk in terms of our alliance as a strong alliance and these guys violated our agreements and so we killed them, that kind of bravado on diplomatic terms attracts attention. And you have Killa B here who loves to destroy things like that. You have other places like anybody who puffs up bigger than they actually are is going to attract attention, and that's what I think that's a tension we're feeling here. Is that Killa B's like, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to poke at you a little bit, and it's inviting, like, check me on that. Like, if you're talking like a powerful entity, and you're not, you're attracting the attention of actual powerful entities, I think.
Let me contrast for a second, though.
Yeah.
At no point would you see the Imperium asking Iron Armada or suggesting to Iron Armada to attack someone as a proxy for us. Whereas if we go back to the earlier discussion about fraternity, I don't see that being the case with that group, because I absolutely see the NCPL side making suggestions to their friends in fraternity about who to attack to advance their narrative. Am I wrong?
Well, hang on. So if you listen to certain meaty shows, there's an argument that goes two ways with that. Either, of course we do this thing which you guys think is bad. It will be stupid for us not to take advantage of this. But of course we don't do that. That's bad. That's what NCPL do. Like, you can't have it both ways, whether you're like, you are doing...
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that if you're going to say that having an agreement not to hit each other's structures does not make one aligned with someone. That's the argument I'm making.
Again, there's all kinds of gray area here, and the counterpoint that I'm going to make to myself, right? Because I just told Fleep, like, the more boasting you do, the more attention you attract. Is what are smaller alliances supposed to do in order to make their mark in the game if they can't be independent and take on and talk about why don't we cover these stories where a smaller alliance beats up another smaller alliance?
There's nothing you can do, which is why I'm not criticizing Iron Armada for doing it, or generally anyone, because right now in the current EVE meta, EVE 2017, you either have to be friends with NCPL or you have to be friends with the Imperium, or you're just gonna get stomped on, which is basically what happened to Provi, which is basically what happened to Provi for a while until Provi decided, because it was always PL and NC beating up on him. They decided to sort of, like, I'm not saying they're friends with goons or anything, but I'm saying, if, for example, we saw that last weekend, there was this big timer, or there was this big fight going. Actually, it wasn't a big fight. There was the Spectre 300 event, right? The Spectre fleet event. They formed up a 200, 300 man fleet of battleships, and I went to Providence to get a fight out of it. And I wanted to go there with an NC dot fleet. And basically, the second that Test and Provi and Goons knew that NC was forming, they decided to band together. So it was Goons, and Test and Provi, and they basically denied us to, like, we basically couldn't go, and they killed the Spectre fleet so fast, together with all the bomb runs that happened onto the Spectre fleet. But the whole Spectre fleet was vaporized within like 5 minutes. It was actually disgusting, and I'm not mad about that, because we would do it the exact same thing if Goons or Test or Provi came north, right? And for them, they're trying to draw their line at the moment, or Willie already said they already drew the line. For them, catches the line. Anything further south of that, they do not want NCPL to extend. They call it the anti-NCPL pact. It's actually an anti-NCPL pact.
That's great.
And that's fine, because, like I said, we would do the exact same thing in the north. I'm just saying, like, you can't go without that, because you're just gonna get bullied on by either of the bigger alliances, and you'll just eventually have to side with one alliance to be able to not die.
And a big example of that in more recent history as well was Brave. Started up, but it was a big alliance, but it had, being in Brave, it was a huge alliance. It had everything. It had no real firepower that some of the older, more established ones refused to deal with any other alliance at all. And in the end, it just got farmed by everybody until it reached breaking point and then broke. And that's essentially what happens.
Well, what I'm looking at is the mistakes of the past, and I wonder if Jurius is like reflecting some of that. And FCON being boastful and not being considered serious, and SMA being boastful and not being considered serious. Like, these groups tend to get picked on and stuff. Now, I'm not saying that Jurius is. I'm not saying that the Alliance is Iron Armada is SMA or FCON, because they're smaller and they're more PvP oriented. They're led by Tridget, who's actually a friend of mine from EN24, and they have Merdud in there, who does the what is that?
Mind Clash podcast.
Spinal Tap show. What's it called?
Mind Clash podcast.
Mind Clash, which I listen to all the time. I actually do. I just forgot the title. So these are guys that I like and consider friends, but they're a mid-tier, and they don't want to become part of a coalition or anything like that. Is there room for that kind of group?
There isn't Fountain, which is why it's perfect play.
There is now.
Fountain is really out of the scope right now. Like, at the moment, nobody really cares about Fountain, because it's just everything's happening in the Catch area, right? Everything's happening around Curse, Catch, sort of the south, and nobody really cares about Fountain. So right now, Fountain is a great place, in my opinion, for smaller alliances to sort of flourish and try their things. So if you're listening and you're in a small PvP alliance, you want to go to 0-0, go to Fountain. You'll probably have some fun over there, whereas you won't have it in Catch, because Catch right now is actually a meme, so I hate to say it, but Catch is a war zone, which means, like, nobody's really going to give you a good fight in Catch. You're just going to get blobbed on by one side or the other, most of the times anyways. There's some fun.
Both Fountain and Catch. Right? Yeah.
Is Fountain Gore still a big thing in Fountain now, or have they gone away too?
No, they're still around. Fountain Gore is still a thing. If they're big or not, I don't know.
Those are the natives that fight off all the people who came after them every once in a while.
Yeah. I tell you what, there's any small group, sort of mid-sized group that's looking to claim a bit of space and go out that way, they will definitely provide plenty of content. They are the masters at harassing whoever lives in Fountain.
Yeah. All right, a couple more things before we go. We need to wrap up. Let's real quick. RVB is dead. Is that right, Artemis?
It certainly looks that way. I mean, they've lost almost 3/4 of Red Federation. Blue Federation is dropping quickly as well. I know, Tiberius, your buddy who lost the Marshals in Blue Federation. Do you
That's right.
have any info?
No, I mean, to be honest with you, I thought RVB kind of went in after they banned the casinos and they lost a lot of backers, and they had some other internal dramas sort of a year or so ago. So I was actually kind of surprised that they were still a thing. But yeah, it's kind of been on the cards for a little while now that, you know, RVB was either going to make it or break in the last few months, and it seems they've broken.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we will see on December 5th a new expansion coming out. Not new expansion, actually, it's probably an overstatement, but an update to the game. And there's going to be a couple things that are pretty big and will have a significant impact, but probably not until weeks later, maybe months later. We're talking about the alphas getting a lot more room to do things because their skill cap is going to move to 20 million from, I believe it's 5 million now. Or is it 5.5 million?
So the amount of skills which you can train as an alpha is only 5 million, but you can utilize up to 20 million. It's a bit of a quirky system, but...
Right. That's a good distinction, though. You can utilize 20 million. You can't train up to it. You need to find a way to get those skills.
You will be able to train up to it, but the only way you'll be able to do it is using the daily skill injectors, which will become available for alphas. And I believe they sell for 20 plex each.
Yep.
It's interesting you mentioned that because those specifically were left out of the dev blog when the new alpha changes were announced for the December update. I was talking with some other people who were quite concerned about the way daily skill injectors may have been implemented, and I think they may not be coming out in December.
Now, that would be a pity because that was one way to actually have them, pay and train in little bite-sized chunks of like 50, 70 million a piece a day, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. It was try to sort of make it a little bit smaller and a little bit more approachable for people that didn't want to pay for the game, but wanted to add in some of the additional skills. That was an easier way for them to do it. But certainly you're right, it's up to 5 million. It's interesting they left it out of the dev blog, but I'm pretty sure it is still coming out next weekend, right? With the new skill injectors, mini injectors.
It's a good question. It hasn't really been talked about since then, but that wasn't that long ago. Who knows? We'll find out.
But yeah, it's very interesting. If Graf Tolkien hates VNIs now, he is definitely going to hate VNIs in the next few months.
Why? They'll be able to use them that are...
Because, you'll be able to use them. Because this is a really important distinction that's changing. So in Alpha at the moment, you create the character, it can train the racial-related skills for that. So Amarr, lasers, Caldari, missiles, all that sort of good stuff. Now, all Alpha skills, skills that are designated an Alpha, if you train them as an Alpha, and then your Omega runs out or you use the skill injectors to buy those skill points, you can still carry on using them even if you're not subbed. And that means you can cross-train into other alliances, which is great. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is probably the best thing for alphas that could possibly happen because it gives them so much more flexibility. Because who the hell wants to be like stuck flying around in ships you don't want to fly when another ship in another race does another job that you can't get into? This will allow them to do that, and that is probably the most beneficial change on this. It allows people to fill their toolbox out a bit more, and I think it will help retention rate. But it includes faction ships, all the way up to battleships, including the Machariel.
And small and medium T2 weapons and upgrades.
Yep.
They highlighted that in their video,
It's
right?
great because the Ferox is such a balanced space vessel, so I'm looking forward to seeing even bigger Ferox.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was sitting next to Celine when CCP made the announcement of the expanded alpha skill set at eVegas, and instantly he looks over and he's like, we're having everybody train an alpha account to have Ferox fleet staged. Like, it is actual MC is making alpha Ferox fleets to place around New Eden specifically as a result of this. But I think it's worth mentioning, it wasn't explicitly clarified, but heavy drones are effectively battleship-sized weapons if you look at the way things are typically classified. So if I understand properly, alphas won't be able to use heavy drones with Vector Navy issues, or at least T2. They can use Geckos, they can use faction drones, but the real kicker that you get with the new training is they can fly Gilas, which use medium drones, which they can Tech 2, and they operate very similarly to AFK VNIs.
And just to point out that in the upcoming event, the arms race event that's going to be coming to Tranquility next week, they are going to be dropping augmented drone blueprints. So expect that those to be flying all over the place next week.
Nice.
I was incredibly excited when CCP banned augmented drones from the AT because it meant they got a whole lot cheaper and I can actually use them in PvP now. It's fantastic.
So that's interesting, though, that nullsec coalitions will create caches of not just ships, but of players, of accounts.
Yeah, you saw Horde try to do it when they initially went to take over the Judah market when Citadels and all that stuff came out. There were Zombies or something like that. I don't think it ever worked properly for them. I don't know if that's an organization thing, a commitment thing from their members, or the limited skill set of alphas at the time. But certainly MC will be trying it out when the new changes come in.
Expect more Ferox fleets until they get nerfed.
Yeah. All right. I think we pretty much covered it. Is there anything you guys think we missed that you want to talk about? Any announcements or anything?
Only other announcement. Oh, fuel. Do we want to cover fuel?
Is there much?
Pretty long one.
Yeah. I think we covered it in the last two shows. But is there any new information?
No.
Okay. But I will say, I will ask this because this is what the show is for. How can people prepare for this December 5th deadline? What can they do to save money or to get themselves prepared to be in good shape?
Build more fuel blocks now.
That would be my guess. Build your fuel blocks now.
Keep mining in your oracles, get more oracles.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
I would also move capital ships before the 5th, right? Because they're going to go up in cost to move.
Yeah,
I
it
think
will. It really sucks for Mercenary Coalition because that's sort of the way that we deploy across New Eden. One of the things that we like to do is in 48 hours we can move an entire PvP alliance from one side of New Eden to the other, and that's
why you put your keep star in the middle of the map so you can do that. But now it's going to cost you.
One other thing I need to note: I double checked, and daily alpha injectors will be coming with the December 5th release. It is confirmed on Eve updates.
Excellent. So that's been solved. Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how those are used. And I hadn't heard about caches of alts in different areas. Actually, I did hear that, but I heard that from high-end players like XXDeath yesterday, or the other show when he was talking to Boat on the Meta Show last week, which was a good episode. You should see it.
You're a terrible Alliance member. You should know about that.
I do know about it. I just don't. I mean, to me, that's a new phenomenon.
He doesn't say these things because Lady Scarlet might kick him out of the alliance.
Yeah, I'm always on thin ice with her, so I tiptoe a lot. But you know, XXDeath was saying that back then you didn't move ships around. It took too much work to move them around, so you just bought alts, and he had 140 alt characters, all positioned in different parts of the map, so that he didn't have to move all these things back and forth. And that's playing a very high-end game. That's some commitment right there. All right. That's about it for this week. Thanks all you guys for showing up. Darius Doctor, good luck on your series of articles on diplomacy. We'll look forward to those on INN. Apophany, Artemis, it's great to have you on the show. We'll have you back. I know you'd be good at this, and you are.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Thanks as always. Killer B, thanks as always. Great information. Noisy Gamer, thanks for showing up. And we're so happy to have Tiberius back.
Yeah.
Oh, and Tiberius has one more thing.
I do. I can't come on this show without plugging player meets that are coming up. But I also just Yeah, but I'd also just want to say a great thanks to all the people that turned up at EVE London a couple of weeks ago. I had a great time. It was really nice to see some old faces and meet some new ones as well. But we've got coming up this weekend, Toronto Monthly Meetup. That's in a new location, the Bad Alley Bar and Kachina in Toronto. Go check that one out. We got the Perth Side Beach Barbecue, those Aussies like doing their thing in the summer, as per usual. That's at Floret Beach in Perth. So check that one out. That is also on the 9th of December. We got the Brisbane meet also on the 9th of December. EVE Glasgow have their annual meet on the 28th of December at the Hillhead Book Club at the normal place. This is an interesting one. There's an EVE Antarctica on the 29th of December.
Do we have like scientists down there or something?
Apparently so. It is at base, I'm going to butcher this name, Marambio in Antarctica. So if you're one of the 3,000 people that live in that area of the world, then go check that one out. But that's very interesting. It looks like it might be affiliated with G Fleet, so there might be some German members up there somewhere.
Amazing.
I can't get through a show without talking about EVE tournament stuff. EVE-NT Minors and Majors return this weekend. It's our penultimate weekend before the coming next weekend, which will be the finals. We have the Minors tonight at, I want to say, 1900, and then the Majors tomorrow night at also 1900. And then the following week will be the grand finals.
Also, going back to the meetups, if you live in Vancouver or the Seattle or Vancouver Lower Mainland area and you'd like to come to a meetup, I host the meetups in Vancouver. They happen on the third Tuesday of every month in New Westminster at the Boston Pizza.
The Boston Pizza one. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for wrapping all that up, guys. Oh, one last thing. West LA meet we were talking about. Dunk, Dinkle, and I are talking about having some people over in the the West LA area. So if you are in that area and are interested, let us know. Let me know. Come on to Talking Stations Discord or chat me or send me a direct message, whatever. And let me know if that's something you would be interested in. So that we can figure out how much effort to put into it if we do it. If not, Dunk and I'll just get together, have a beer together. All right, guys. Thanks again for showing up. That's going to be all we have this week. We will see you next week on Talking in Stations.